What's up, everyone? I'm Kimmi Chex. That dude right there is my BFF Adam Rank. Even though the regular season for fantasy football is over, that doesn't mean we still have hot takes and opinions. It's time for us to reminisce a little bit, Adam Rank. I feel like I haven't seen you in so long. It's once fantasy's over, I'm like, where's my guy Adam? But here we are again. Now we get to talk about some quarterbacks. I want to do some hits and some misses. And I want to start with you, Rank, about your biggest quarterback hit. Now, this could be a guy that you hyped all preseason, who went out and balled out, or a guy that you just told everyone, watch this dude, he is going to be fantasy relevant. Who is your man?
Well, I would have been very happy to have gotten this one wrong, but I said that Aaron Rodgers was going to come out and have one of the best seasons of his career. And I know there's people out there who don't believe in momentum or players being human beings that are motivated by outside stimuli. But once they drafted Aaron Rodgers' eventual replacement, instead of drafting somebody like Brandon Ayuk or T. Higgins or somebody like that, I knew Rodgers was going to go out there and have one of the best seasons of his career. And that's exactly what he did. He was one of the most consistent quarterbacks in fantasy football. I had him on a number of teams. I know it left me like, listen, I don't like the Packers and I don't like Aaron Rodgers as a Bears fan, but all that goes out the window when you're trying to beat your friends in fantasy football. So I was happy to grab Aaron Rodgers. He was usually like the 10th, 11th, or 12th quarterback off the board, and I enjoyed his success as a fantasy enthusiast. As a fan of sport, I hated it, but as a fantasy enthusiast, I was fully on board with this.
So you, a Chicago Bears fan, were rooting for the petty party that was Aaron Rodgers this season. He was so good, and the connection with him and Devontae Adams, it ruined a lot of fantasy lives for the people who were not lucky enough to get them in fantasy football on their squads, people like me. All right, so you like Aaron Rodgers. That was one of your hits. A hit that I don't think we're really talking about enough, especially with the circumstances around his offense, is Deshaun Watson. Now, he's been fantasy relevant as a quarterback for years now, right? But then this season was a little up and down for him and the Houston Texans. Now, let's just start with this. They lost DeAndre Hopkins, right? Huge blow. He was traded to Arizona, and him and Kyler Murray had their own little season. So take him out of the equation. That means Deshaun Watson was not playing with his biggest receiving threat. Then you start the season by losing football games. Then they fire the head coach. Then some of his biggest players go out and they get injured. Barring all of those circumstances, Deshaun Watson still finished as a fantasy quarterback number 5 with the most passing yards thrown by a fantasy quarterback this season, 4,823 yards, 33 passing touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns on the ground himself. Seeing all of those circumstances and everything that happened, and for him to still finish as a quarterback number 5, I think it's pretty impressive, and we're not giving Deshaun Watson enough shine and enough credit for that performance this season.
Yeah, the Will Fuller thing, I believe that people kind of gloss over because, as you said, everybody remembers DeAndre Hopkins in the beginning of the season. But Will Fuller was absolutely amazing during his time as the number 1 guy. I know a lot of people had concerns. They're like, he can't be a number 1 guy or anything like that. And he went out there and did it. So Deshaun Watson, and I know that the players on the team, and it's significant when guys like J.J. Watt, we're like, oh, dude, we're wasting a year of your prime. Like, as somebody who watches the Angels and knows about, like, Mike Trout losing years of his prime, it's tough to sit there and watch Deshaun Watson go through this, especially going back to the Chicago Bears. This was the quarterback that I wanted them to take. And so
now there could be a possibility and an opportunity. Definitely a lot of people have to stay tuned throughout the offseason with rumors that Deshaun Watson may no longer want to be a Houston Texan. So maybe your Chicago Bears can finally do the right thing and get him as their starting quarterback. All right, so we talked about the good, the QB hits. But what about the misses? Now, this could be a guy that you thought was going to be great and then he sucked, or a guy that you thought was going to suck, but then he ended up being great. Who is your QB miss?
Well, I'm going to go to Los Angeles, and let me start with Jared Goff, because I had high expectations for him. With Todd Gurley being gone, we expected the Rams to throw the ball a little bit more anytime they got near the goal line, but it turns out Sean McVay's like, nah, dude, I'm just going to go to Malcolm Brown. You're like, okay, that makes sense. Darrell Henderson, and of course, at the end of the season, they're relying heavily on Cam Akers. And Jared Goff just never really developed. Like, I've called him the West Coast Trubisky in the past, and it kind of seems that that's accurate. And John Wolford is probably a better quarterback. But I also need to point out that as much as I like Jared Goff, I didn't like Justin Herbert. And this is coming into the draft when I was doing mock drafts. And Kim, I do real mock drafts. Like I do them with like Chad and DJ and everybody, Lance, Zerline, and Bucky. Like I do mock drafts and I'm like, I'm not sure that Justin Herbert's going to come in and have a huge impact. Watched him a lot at Oregon. Saw him not play very well in some of the big games that the Ducks were in. So I was a little apprehensive about it. But Justin Herbert was amazing. Like he came out and just exceeded every expectation you could have. I mean, he comes in there, he gets the start in his first game against the defending champions, goes out there and plays amazingly. It's the Chargers, so of course they lose. But you're like, this guy's incredible. And it's funny because I ended up having both Aaron Rodgers and Justin Herbert on a lot of my teams this year. And I ended up trading Aaron Rodgers because, listen, I'm ultimately going to be a Bears guy and try to just get rid of Aaron Rodgers. But Justin Herbert looked great. There's an opportunity for Justin Herbert to be one of the first 3 quarterbacks off the board next season.
Ooh, a lot of spice. He's no longer a rookie, but we did see all of the impressive things that he did in his rookie season, especially getting the surprising call to start because of that medical emergency that happened to Tyrod Taylor, and then he took over the job for the rest of the season. So congrats to all of you who went and picked up Justin Herbert in fantasy football. Good things for him and Keenan Allen next season. All right, that was your miss, but I want to talk about a guy who I kind of had low expectations for, who actually went out and balled out. It's Ryan Tannehill, the quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. Now, he had a 15th round ADP in 2020 fantasy drafts. He was the 21st quarterback selected off the board. However, he finished as a quarterback number 7. He actually finished above the guy you just talked about, Justin Herbert, along with Tom Brady and Lamar Jackson, just to name a few. Now, I think my assumption, and kind of the assumption that you may have had with Jared Goff when they got rid of Todd Gurley, so you thought they won't run the ball as much, maybe they'll throw the ball more. I just assumed that he was going to continue to give handoffs to Derrick Henry, and this was just going to continue to be a Derrick Henry offense. Ryan Tannehill was a deep ball threat this season, and we have to look at what his production meant for guys like A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. This was a guy that a lot of people could have picked up on the waiver wire or just had him as a streaming quarterback, and then he actually went out to ball out and win some people some fantasy championships. So thank you so much, Ryan Tannehill. I like the unexpected. Let's keep this up for next season and see how that Titans offense continues to grow and thrive and flourish. All right, we got the hits, we got the misses, but let's talk about that dude that you wish you traded for, a quarterback that you wish you had on your fantasy roster this season. Who is your man, Adam Rank?
Well, I think Josh Allen is somebody that I didn't draft enough because I felt like that was, I had confidence in him coming into the season. I was like, okay, I kind of like Josh Allen, but I was willing to wait a little bit more because I had Aaron Rodgers earmarked for a lot of my teams. Because a lot of the leagues that I'm in, they will give you 6 points for passing touchdowns, which to me is always an important part of doing your draft evaluation is how is your league structured? So I knew that I was going to be likely leaning towards Aaron Rodgers. And so I think that I had a miss with not getting Josh Allen enough in the draft, although I did get Aaron Rodgers. It wasn't too bad. But not trading
humble
for
brags.
him when a little bit of a humble brag, but not trading for him when he was having his skid, because the first month of the season, he was amazing. He was averaging over 25 fantasy points per game, depending on your scoring and everything like that. But he had a couple of weeks where he fell off. And I think that should have been an opportunity for me to go out and pounce and trade for him. And I didn't go all in enough. And I look back at it and I'm like, I wish I would have made those moves, especially with people who are panicking over his performance, because towards the end of the season, he picked back up to where he was at the beginning of the year and, of course, crushed it and was one of the best quarterbacks in fantasy football.
I'm going to have to double down and agree with you on this one because, like you said, in fantasy football, a lot of fantasy managers, we hit the panic button. So we look at a guy like Josh Allen who goes up and puts up 25 plus fantasy points a few consecutive weeks, and then he dips down to 12 or 15 fantasy points. I'm just making these numbers up at this point. But we see that production and we're automatically like, no, get him off. He's never going to be relevant again. We saw that also happen with Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, some quarterbacks who started really hot and then they kind of fizzled their way out. But Josh Allen came back at the latter part of this season, and he was incredible. I love Josh Allen, but I also love what he's done for Stefan Diggs. A lot of people did not draft Stefan Diggs as highly as they should have because we didn't think that Josh Allen had a deep ball threat for that Buffalo Bill offense. We understand that he can rush the ball. He had 8 rushing touchdowns this season. That was the third most amongst quarterbacks, but we were curious how he was going to throw the ball. Stefan Diggs, he finished as the fantasy wide receiver number 3 with Josh Allen as his starting quarterback. He only had 8 touchdowns as a wide receiver, but you have to look at his receptions and his receiving yards. The most receptions and the most receiving yards this season by a wide receiver. So this little duo, Josh Allen and Stefan Diggs, is going to be pretty scary good next season, and I'm sure they will be moving up plenty of fantasy draft boards. All right, Rank. That was fun. I love doing this. I love our little quarterback chat.
I missed this.
A quick little recap of the 2020 fantasy season. But reminder, for all of your NFL fantasy needs, just go ahead and follow us on social at NFL Fantasy. We got year-round hot takes, content, opinions. You can see us all year, so make sure you follow along. Also, you can just like and subscribe down below on YouTube. Thanks, guys. Nice to see you, Rank.
Good seeing you.